Matthew chapter 18, verses 5 to 13. The believing centurion. A number that we are featuring is number 1545, Centurion. And the Greek grammatical structure for this section, the personal pronouns, which are highlighted in color. And it begins, Iselthonti they to isu is Capernaum. And Jesus, having entered into Capernaum, the postpositive they, into Capernaum. Now this was a little town on the northern end of the Sea of Galilee where Jesus was staying. And Jesus had just come down from the mountain, Mount Meron, as I've showed in the last section, which I believe is Mount Meron. And so he's entered into the city, and it says, Prosilthan avto ekatontarkos. There came forward to him a centurion, hekatontarkos. And archos is a ruler of 100, ekaton, a hectare. He ruled 100 people. It says in Exodus 18:21, and you yourself look about from all the people, from mighty men and godly, and then among other commanders of hundreds. So there was a man that was over 100 people. Sometimes it differed, but generally this is what the word means. Centurions in the New Testament, basically a Roman officer, and it says in Matthew 27:54, and the centurion and the ones with him, keeping guard over Jesus, having beheld the earthquake and the things happening, feared exceedingly, saying, truly this was Son of God. Now this is a very important verse in the Bible, and we'll go into it a little bit later and show how it is so important. So that you can see that these Romans, some of them said that he was Son of God. They heard who he was and knew what he claimed to be. The sign was above him on the cross. And then in Acts it says, and a certain man was there in Caesarea by name Cornelius, a centurion of the cohort, being called Italic, and he and his family become believers. In Acts 21:32, Paul coming back to Jerusalem and a riot happening with all the people when they saw him, says, who immediately, having taken soldiers and centurions, ran down upon them. And the ones beholding the commander and the soldiers ceased beating Paul. And then they were going to whip him to find out what he was saying that was so bad that got all these people up in an uproar. And it says in Acts 22:25, and as they stretched him forward with straps, Paul said to the centurion standing, is it allowed to you to crack a whip on a Roman man? And hearing, the centurion came forward to report to the commander, saying, look to what you're about to do, for this man's a Roman. And then in Acts 23:17-23, it says, and Paul, having called one of the centurions, said, and this is when he's in jail, take this young man to the commander, for he has something to report to him. And having called 2 centurions, he, the commander, said, prepare 200 soldiers, that they should go into Caesarea, 70 horsemen and 200 spearmen from the 3rd hour of the night. So here we have another important verse. We see that they were horsemen, so undoubtedly the 2 centurions were riding on horses. And in Acts 27:1-28 to the end, 27:1 to 28:16, very first verse says, and when it was decided for us to sail away unto Italy, they delivered up both Paul and a certain other prisoners to a centurion by name Julius of the cohort of Augustus. So we have Cornelius and Julius, 2 centurions by name, but we're going to find another one. Now we'll go back up to our text. And so this centurion came forward to him, parakalon avton, enjoining him, asking, beseeching him, ke legon, and say, Kyrie, Lord, opes mu vevlite enti ikia paralytikos. My servant's lying in the house, paralyzed, a paralytic. Vinos vasanizomenos, being tormented awfully. We see to him, there came forward to him would be Jesus. Otherwise it would say, and entering Jesus, having entered into Capernaum, there came forward to Jesus a centurion. Enjoining Jesus, it would say, but here it's got him instead. And saying, O Lord, and my servant is the centurion, he's mine, saying, O Lord, my servant, the centurion's servant, his name, whatever it would be, is lying in the house paralytically, awfully tormented. Ke legi avto o Jesus. And Jesus says to him, and that would be to the centurion. And Jesus says to his name, ego, I think this is the first place we see the word ego, which is the first person singular of the personal pronouns. That we have the English word ego, I. So I, Jesus, instead it would be say, and Jesus said to him, Jesus coming will cure avton, him, the servant. Elthon therapevso avton. Therapeutics comes from this word here, 23:23. I'll cure him. Verse 8, ke apokrithis o ekatonterkos ephi, and responding, the centurion said, Kyrie, O Lord, uki me ikanos, ina mu ipo tin stegin iselthis. I am not fit that you should enter under my roof. Mine being the centurion. You should enter underneath my roof. Allah monon ipe logon, but only speak a word, or the word. I put thes in italics because there's no article there. Speak the word. Ke iathisite opes mu. And my servant, the centurion's servant, will be healed. Just speak the word. Just say the word. And he says, verse 9, Ke gar ego anthropos imi, epo exousion. For I also am a man under authority. So basically he's showing that he believes that Jesus is under the authority of God. And I, being the centurion, and then ekon, having ep imav ton stratiotus, having under myself soldiers, and then there's the epo, remember that then there's a following vowel, so it's abbreviated to ep, having under myself stratiotus, a strategy comes from that word. Ke lego tuto, and I say to this one, porefthiti, go. Ke porefite, and he goes. Ke alo, to another, arku. Ke urkite, come, and he comes. Ke to thulo mu, and to my bondman, the one is sick, pi son tuton, do this. KPE, and he does. Acousis, I'm laughing because this is a man who is a centurion who has a lot of power in this area with all these soldiers, but he is showing his humble side and his caring side. Oh, what a person that we could look at and want to be like. This centurion, even though he could cause a lot of problems to a lot of people, no, he's a believing in Jesus, and he's a humble man, and he cares about his bondman, just as Jesus does. Jesus has all this power, but yet he came to earth as a man, ended up serving to people, and then dying a horrible death when he had the power to overcome everybody, sent a legion of angels, wipe out the earth. But he didn't. And so the relation between the two, or the correlation between the two, is interesting. So then he continues to do this, and he does. Pi son tuto ke pi. Acousus they o Isus ethavmase. And when hearing, there's the de, the postpositive, or it could be but hearing. When hearing, and Jesus marveled. Keipe tis akoluthusin, and he said to the ones following. Now there's people, to the ones following. Amen, amen, I say to you, lego imin, I say to you, to the ones following. And that's modifying theirs in the plural. To the ones are plural, and this is plural. If this was singular, then it couldn't possibly be modifying the plural. Ude into Israel tosavtin pistin evron. Not even, I say to you, not even in Israel found I such a great belief. A belief. Pistin. Now, King James, other Bibles could have faith, which I never use. I never use the word faith because you can see in other places, pistin is in pistos, it's also a verb, and it's also an adjective. The man of belief, or the believing man, or to believe, unbelief, are all. But you can't have faith, or you can have faith, but you can't do faith. It's not a verb as such, the word faith. It's more or less a static action having the faith, but you don't have any place to do faith because there's no verbal form for faith. So that's why I don't use the word faith, because it doesn't have a verbal form. To believe or to trust instead is what I use. So Jesus saying he hasn't found such belief in all Israel. What a thing to say. Lego they imin oti poli apo anatolon ke thesmon ixusi. I say to you, to the ones there, the plural again, that many from east and west will come. Ke anaklithison meta Avraham, ke Isaac, ke Jacob, enti Vasilia ton oranon. And they'll come from the east and the west, and they will be laying down with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob in the kingdom of the heavens. I believe that is us he's talking about. The people have come from the east and the west, from all over, that believe in the Lord, will be laying down with Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and this centurion. In verse 12, Ide ii tis vasilias ekvlithison is toskotos to exoteron. But the sons of the kingdom, there's the Jews, the unbelieving Jews, will be cast out into the outer darkness. And so this is important here when we see the unbelieving Jews, how they will influence what we're going to go through here in a little bit. And he continues, Eki este o klavthmos ke ovrigmos ton odon ton. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. It's not going to be a good place, outer darkness. Hades, Sheol in the Hebrew, Gehenna with a burning fire. It's not going to be a pleasant place to be. A gnashing of teeth and weeping, knowing that you could have been with the Lord Jesus Christ in heaven, but you chose not to. Didn't want to be with God on earth, so you won't be with God in heaven. In verse 13, ke ipen oi sus to ekatantarki? And Jesus said to the centurion, ipage, go, and as keos epistevsas, and as you trusted. See, now here you couldn't say, and as you faithed, wouldn't make sense. So faith is just a terrible word to use. And everybody's Bible studies over the years, everybody's trying to figure out what faith means. Oh, faith means this, faith means that. It's like, wow. No, it's very simple. Believe or trust. And let it be to you. Genethitosi. And who's to you is to the centurion, and si is singular. And this is a singular centurion. Ke iathi opes of two, and I didn't make the arrow here, but it goes to the centurion. And his centurion, his being the centurion, was healed. Iathi in teora ekini, in that hour. Now, we're not going to go next to the next section, but we're going to go into a presentation that I'm presenting to you on more about the centurion and the things that followed, how it affects us even today. Now we're going to go into a history lesson of the Roman occupation of Israel, which will go down to even today. We'll find out what that's all about as we show you on this presentation. It begins in 143 BC, 143 years before Christ. The Jews established independence from the Seleucid Empire. The Seleucids were from the remnants of Alexander the Great's empire. When he died, his empire was divided to the Diadochi, as they're called. Ptolemy took Egypt. He was one of the generals. And Seleucus took Syria. Lysander, I believe, took Athens and Greece and so forth. But this empire came to an end around 143. In 133 BC, the Seleucid ruler Antiochus Sidetes was defeated by the Parthians, which were in the area where Turkey would be today. Then in 83 BC, 50 years later, Tigranes the Great of Armenia and Mithridates of Pontus, both around the Armenia, Georgia area, they invaded the Seleucid area of Syria. And then they were defeated by Lucilius of Rome in 69 BC. But the people in Rome didn't like what Lucilius was doing with these new conquered people of Syria. They sent the general Pompey, who was at this time a consul, which was the highest elected public official of the Roman Republic, and this was in 70 BC. Pompey had been very successful throughout the Mediterranean in conquering pirates and going into Spain, places like that. So they sent him to replace Lucilius, and he arrived and annexed Syria in 64 BC. Then he went down towards Israel, and at that time the Hasmonean Civil War was going on between Hyrcanus II and Aristobulus II. And they were of the Maccabees. You can read about that in the book of Maccabees in the Apocrypha. So Pompey went down there, and he sided with Hyrcanus over the brother Aristobulus, and Hyrcanus talked Pompey into besieging Jerusalem, where Aristobulus was hidden out. And so Pompey put a siege to Jerusalem and finally entered into Jerusalem, took control with his 10th legion, Fretensis. And the legion Fretensis was one of many legions that Pompey had. During the civil war that'll happen a little later between Pompey and Julius Caesar, they each could have 5 or 10 legions. And you could have a 10th legion of Julius Caesar and a 10th legion of Pompey, and they had different names, and Pompey's was called Fretensis. So now we see this legion in Jerusalem. And this was before the time of Jesus, a little bit before. Then what happens is Pompey goes to war against Julius Caesar, and Pompey is killed, and then Caesar is also killed by Brutus, and Octavius Caesar becomes Caesar Augustus, the emperor, and the republic comes to an end, and Augustus is now the ruler, and this is the time that Jesus was born. And then over the next 20 or 30 years, these Roman legions started spreading out into Israel, and we know that one legion went up to close to the Sea of Galilee, the second legion called Triana, and also the 6th legion called Ferrata, and they built a camp in Legio, and we will go through and explain this camp next. But we know that these 2 legions were there because they found pottery that had the name 2TR and VI for the FER Ferrata for the legions on tiles that were used on roofs and so forth. Now we know that the Centurion was someplace fairly close to where Jesus was located in Capernaum. And we know from history that the Ferrata legion, the 6th legion, was stationed somewhere in Galilee, and the Triana, the 2nd legion, earlier, even into the 1st century. Could have been in the middle, early, we don't really know for sure. But a man named Gottlieb Shoemaker, who was an American of German descent, ended up going to Israel, and he was an engineer, and he received a job from the Ottoman Empire to build roads and buildings, things like that, and he was interested in archaeology, and he started searching up in Megiddo, the Megiddo Tell, which was a large mound, and digging it and he started finding Roman ruins of certain pottery and coins and things like that. Now this article we're going to go through here shows a little bit of a history of what he found. We'll go through and I'll show you where it came. Basically, here's the ISBN number and the information where it comes from. Strata Bulletin of the Anglo-Israel Archaeological Society. Now, at the beginning, it says textual sources indicate that in the early 2nd century. Now, these dates that they're coming up with are suggestions of what the time may be. Doesn't necessarily mean this is correct. We have to understand that the writer of this article was Jewish, Tepper, and other people, and they don't have a great desire to embellish Christianity. If anything, would be the opposite. So taking these dates with a grain of salt. But anyway, indicates in the 2nd century, so that would be 100s, the Roman 6th Legion Ferrata was deployed to Judea to replace the 2nd Triana Legion, which had been briefly stationed there. Now, how long? Well, we know it was in the 1st century as we go through here. And it continues, the Castra, the legionary base, and that's where the Centurion would be stationed, probably the Centurion that we're referring to here in the 8th chapter of Matthew. of the sixth Ferrata was located near the Jewish Samaritan village of Kfar Otni in the Great Plain, at the site of Legio, south of Tel Megiddo, in the Jezreel Valley. So we know now, because of Shoemaker, where this was. Here is a map. Now here's Galilee. Capernaum is up here, and the Legio was here, the camp, about 30, 40 miles away. Here's a picture of the area. You can go and look on Google Maps, and you find where Highway 66 and 65 cross over, that the Roman legionary base covered this large area right here. And then it continues that these included what they found, Roman pottery, coins, inscriptions from the 6th Legion Ferrata, imprinted roof tiles, among other finds. And then it mentions this Gottlieb Shoemaker that I was talking about. And then, interestingly, Rabbi Gamaliel, early of the late 1st century. Well, Gamaliel was who was at the time of Jesus, when Paul was sat under the feet of Gamaliel. So this brings the whole thing into the time of Jesus. He judged a case at Kfar Otni involving Samaritan witnesses to divorce documents. And a generation later, his son, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamaliel, named the village as a place where one could find Samaritan-grown vegetables. So now we see that these people in the Bible that are mentioned are also tied into this place. And now it says, but Legio is which you would call the camp's name, covers a area approximately 30, I think this is HAS hectares, south of Tel Megiddo. The site sits on the hill of El Menak, a plateau that slopes gradually down to the east and is almost wholly under cultivation by Kibbutz Megiddo. And then Highway 66 runs north and south through the eastern side. And then surface finds from both sides of this road include Roman pottery, coins, and roof tiles, indicate the extent of the site. The earliest archaeological research at the site was carried out by Shoemaker in the early 20th century, 1908, and he excavated part of Tel Megiddo, conducted extensive survey of the ruins, and immediately to the south of the Tel, Shoemaker identified a Roman theater near which he reported architectural ruins and scattered Roman ceramics, among which he found a roof tile stamped with the LEG as Legion 6 VI Ferrata. So now he's finding these roof tiles with the name of the 6th Legion. And then it says, on the basis of milestone inscriptions found along the road from Legio to Caesarea at Sepphoris, Isaac and Roll suggested that Legio II Triana initially encamped at Legio and stayed there for a few years before being replaced by the 6th Legion Ferrata. So they date the establishment of the castra here not before 117. Well, I would date it way before 117. And like I said, it depends on who Isaac, if the person has a bent towards not wanting the things Christians to be that early, or if it was a Christian who wanted it to be early, like myself. So I take these dates, and I think it was a time of Jesus. And there's a picture of it here. And Tepper's original assessment, he hypothesized a castra, that's the camp, roughly 250 by 250 meters, and then enlarged it with another bounded area, 350 by 350. And there it is here. It goes on the other side of the road. If that all takes into place, then it was 350 by 575 meters, 1,200 by 1,900 feet. 4 football fields long and 6 football fields wide. So a pretty large area. Now, I have done a lot of digging there, and we'll go into that a little bit here, show with the diggings that they're doing. And then the variety of finds, and there was a room. They found a room inside where it was possibly where the Centurion lived. A variety of finds in this room are indicative of Roman military occupation, including roof tiles stamped with the Legia 6 Ferrata, several bronze cuirass scales, typical of Roman soldiers in the Antonine period, a stone vessel, in the Antonine period would have been earlier, before Jesus actually, 3 slingshots and an autonomy coin of Tyre dated 108 to 109. So there we go. We're all the way back to 108 or 109. And 2 more coins were found in the surface layer of this room, the first dating to the reign of Agrippa, 11 to 44. There it is, time of Jesus, minted in Jerusalem. So if they found something that early, then that could have been, that place would have been around at the time of Jesus. And then it says 2 amphora were found at the site. The first is a carat amphora dated the 1st to 2nd centuries. The second is an early Roman amphora dated to the end of the 1st and early 2nd centuries. That would be the around 90, something like that. But again, these dates are questionable. And then within this group, however, is a tile of the 2nd Legion Triana, demonstrating the presence of this legion at the site above. So they were there even earlier than Ferrata was, 6th Legion. And then it says 85 coins were recovered in the 2013 season, so that's only 11 years ago, in both the metal detector survey and the excavation. And then it continues and says 17 coins came from the excavation, 7 of which date to the 1st and the 3rd century. So the 1st century is the time of Jesus. And 68 additional coins were found during the metal detector survey, all of them from the topsoil layer. 37 of these coins, more than half, are dated to the 1st to the 2nd, 3rd centuries, and 1st century is the time of Jesus. So we have now coins at that time. Historically, the first arrival of the Legion to this area should be dated to sometime between 105 to 106, but I believe it was way earlier. They probably started coming up there as soon as Pompey came into Israel, and he actually came down from north, from Syria, down into Israel, so they probably set up a camp someplace there at that time. Most scholars agree that Legio II Triana was the first to settle at Legio. And then a short time later, what scholars? Questions. Coins dating from the second half of the 1st century, that's second half would be 51. This would be almost the time of Jesus, suggests the earliest activity at this site. And roof tile stamps and countermark coins demonstrate the presence of the Legion 6 Ferrata. So we pretty well got that the 6th Legion Ferrata was there, and that's the end of this article. So basically, we now see that there is a camp at the crossroads of 65 and 66 highways, about 40 miles from Capernaum, 35 to 40 miles to Capernaum. 1 day's ride on a horse. Horses could go between 10 and 40 miles a day. And the Centurion for sure had a horse, as they rode horses, because it shows in many places that they had horses, especially if the legionnaire we're talking about here was the head of the Ferrata 6th Legion stationed here. He was an important man. Now, a little bit of a conjecture for me at this point here. So our Centurion comes on a horse, and he comes and he has a sick man that he cares a lot about. And there's thousands of soldiers there, but he has somebody that's important to him. Now, where did he hear of Jesus? So people around there were talking about this man who was healing the sick, the lepers, and so forth. It got into the Roman camp, where there was thousands of soldiers, and they started hearing about it because his ministry was up there in Galilee, right at that area by the camp. So this centurion hears about it, and he gets his horse, and he probably has some other men with him, and he goes to find Jesus, and he does, and we see that all written in Matthew 8. Now, Luke has a little bit different. It shows Luke wasn't an eyewitness. Matthew was, but Luke says that the centurion didn't come there, but has sent his men to come, and that Jesus said that he would be healed. And when he got back, these men found him healed. But I would take Matthew as eyewitness over Luke. Now, what more can there be outside of knowing that this centurion came from this nearby camp? Well, what the centurion did next probably was starting to tell all kinds of people there the miracle that took place of his servant, and then other people started hearing about the things of Jesus. And so what did they do? They started getting together and talking about this man, Jesus. The amazing thing that they did is they built a room, probably to go in and talk about Jesus and possibly more. And that's what we're going to go into next, to show you what they built inside this Roman camp. So it was determined by Shoemaker's survey of the land in early 1900s that this area here in this photo is what is the area for this camp, going all the way across. 6 football fields in length, 4 football fields in this other direction, and in the middle is where the officers stayed. This, I believe, is the town of Megiddo, and here is the prison that will be instrumental in finding what we are going to show you. This is an artist's rendition of what the camp might have looked like, and in this center part here is where the officers were staying. Now, some of the prisoners in the prison that was by this area were sent out to clean the area up, and when they were clearing the land, they uncovered a floor of a room that was 16 feet wide and 32 feet long, with a mosaic in it in the middle laid out, and it was all covered with a strata material for a protection which has protected it for a couple of thousand years. And the authorities were called, and they came in and discovered what I believe is probably the most remarkable archaeological find in the history of the world as far as a biblical scholar's point of view. Now we're going to go through an article by Yotan Tepper, who did a lot of exploration in this area with this discovery and the things around it. As we go through this article, we'll just skim through it. We'll have the link on our website on the information section below the video. Now here's another rendition of what it might have looked like at the time. Now we see a picture of the actual excavation of part of this camp that was going on. And at the center is where the centurions would stay and officers. And a little room here was found, and that's what we're interested in. And the room had a mosaic like this one here. This was in another part of the building, a mosaic. But the mosaic that we are interested in was in a room that might have looked something like this. So 32 by 16, it was a building. And what did it have in the building? You can see a table here, and it had a mosaic here and a mosaic back here. And here's one of the mosaics in the room, and we can see the fish, which was a sign for the early Christians. And here's the table. Trapeza, it's called. We'll go through a study on these words. A couple more mosaics. Another mosaic right here, and writing on both ends of the mosaic. And here are the men that are cleaning it. that came maybe from the prison. And we see in the mosaic, again, we have these fish, which depicts the Christian era. And here we have, on one end of this mosaic in the room, it says, Gaius, also called Porphyrius, Centurion, our brother, has made the pavement at his own expense as an act of liberality, and Brutius has carried out the work. And now right here, right here, this is what they call a Chi-Rho, and that was used, it says the Greek letters Chi and Rho, set above one another, form a well-known abbreviation of the word ekatantarchis, a centurion. So this is a centurion by the name of Gaius. Now, why couldn't this Gaius be the one that saw Jesus, had this built, and people would go in there for different reasons? We'll have to do a little conjecture there what it was all about. Then we see this inscription here on the other end of the mosaic, the rectangular mosaic. It says the Keptus inscription. The inscription is set within a rectangle in the western side of the southern mosaic panel. Its frame and letters are traced in black tessera, and the characters are so high. The letters and these are vulgar. It goes into all of this information here. But basically what it has here is prosynicon, and that is number 4374 in the Apostolic Bible, aorist active indicative, to dedicate. Akeptus was a woman's name because this has the eta, which makes it a feminine. Philotheos, and that philotheos is number 5377, adjective or noun substantive, which it is in this place, a noun substantive, the lover of God, a woman, the lover of God. And she dedicated tin trapezon, and a trapezon is a table, and that was those blocks we saw, and on top of that was some type of a table. And then we see down here 3 words, and it's Theo, Isu, Christo, and it's just 2 letters, but the line above it means that it's an abbreviation. And the dot in between, if you enlarge it, you can see that there's a dot right here in between there and there. So there are 3 words, and this is to God, Isu, Jesus, Christo, Jesus Christ. To God, Jesus Christ, menimosinon, a memorial. This memorial area was possibly used to have the elements for the communion, for people to go in and take the bread and the wine on this table. I don't know what else it would have been used for, something like that. But here we have something that was in the first century, possibly right after the death of Christ. A centurion built a room, had it laid with this mosaic, which says, dedicated by a woman, a Keptus, a lover of God, the trapeza, which is above it, to God, Jesus Christ. That's amazing, to God, Jesus Christ. This would have been the earliest, if you want to call it a church, that is in existence. And the usage of it at this early of a time, which I believe could have been in the first century, maybe, who knows, or the start of the second century, that these people then, as I mentioned before, this centurion went back, told people about his healing experience with this man named Jesus, and they know all about what happened to Jesus. He goes down to Jerusalem, and he's taken captive, killed, put on a cross, crucifix, and died, and he rose from the dead. And so these people know all of this, what's going on. I'm sure it was a well-known fact that they had seen, and so then they make this room, and they dedicate it to God Jesus Christ. Now, fairly recently, I ran across a man who is a Christian. He said, believed in Jesus and all these things. But then we got to the real nitty-gritty about, I mentioned about Jesus being God, and he says, well, he's not God. He's just the Son of God, but he's not God. And I didn't have anything. All I had was the Bible to show him, but there's no place where in there he says that he is God. I am God, but there are so many places that are referring to his divinity. But we're not going through all of that. But if I would have shown this man that within 100 years of the life of Jesus, that this could have been written to God Jesus Christ. So the earliest object that we see with the name Jesus Christ written on it is this mosaic, and it calls him God. And this is to God Jesus Christ. That's why I see this as the most amazing archaeological artifact that I've ever seen. Now here's a picture of that, what the ground looks like. It was all covered up with material that preserved it. So now we see this amazing discovery, but what do the Jews want to do with this mosaic? Right here we'll show you an article that I found in one of the Israeli news sites. Here's the article I'm mentioning. It comes from the Times of Israel, and it says, Israel may uproot ancient Christian mosaic, send it to the U.S. Evangelical Museum. And I'm just going to go through it slowly. You can see it, but I'm not going to go completely through it for copyright reasons. I don't want anybody on my case because I copied this from the Israel Times, so we're just going to go through it. It's fairly slow. You can sit there and read it and stop it. You can see there's the mosaic and cleaning it. Pictures that they have pretty much all over of that to God Jesus Christ. Another place to the God where there was no article there, so it was wrong. I'm not sure where I saw that. And anyway, that is what they want to do. Dig it up, send it to the United States. What a disaster. I suppose they would want to get rid of anything other than what they consider to be relative to the Judaism. Really sad, because Jesus is more related to the Judaism than they are, because they don't have as I've mentioned so many times, they don't have the temple of priesthood and sacrifices, but Jesus has all of that. Now our next section is Jesus heals Peter's mother-in-law.